Yes. Call this meeting to order. Now, remember, buttons up if you're going to talk, or buttons forward if you're going to talk. Help Stephen out in the back. As y'all got the agenda, we're going to have we got about 30 minutes of a quick presentation with Mickey Shields from the Iowa League of Cities about some of what the forms of government and how some of them are set up around the state of Iowa, since he knows all of those things. What we do quick first is do a roll call. Minutes, we got to make one quick change in the minutes, but we can deal with that. But I guess our first order of business is call to order, which we did, and roll call. We'll adopt the minutes after we get done with a presentation. So I guess Secretary, roll call.
All right, Vickers.
Here.
Veenstra.
Here.
Connell here. George. Not here. Brish.
Here.
Phelan.
Here.
Eisman.
Here.
Mishevitz.
Here.
Poinkus.
Here.
And also showing Hanson and Clark as alternates here.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and just do the...
Is Mickey signed in yet? Yep. Okay. Why don't we jump to him first, and then we can pick up the minutes after that, because he's on a very tight timetable. So thanks, Mickey, for making a few minutes for us. I told him that we try to get him done in 30 minutes, guaranteeing him 35 at the most, so he can get on to some other things. Thought we'd do a quick introduction around the table so he knows who he's talking to. So, John, give us a quick introduction and like a one-sentence background so he kind of knows who is who.
John Eisenman, retired business owner and resident of Clinton since 1987.
Don Hanson, alternate, retired carpenter, lived in Clinton my whole life.
Bill Mishevitz, semi-retired teacher, social studies.
Kenyon Clark, Clinton resident for 73 years, and that's it.
Dave Vickers, I'll just call it retired journalist.
Sean Connell, local businessman and past councilman for 6 years.
Joe Hoinkes, plant manager at Lyondell-Brazil Chemical Plant here in town.
Matt Brish, born and raised in Clinton and former city attorney, almost 20 years ago, I think. Time flies.
I'm Rich Phelan, retired from Lyondell-Brazil and been a resident of Clinton for 45 years.
Ryan Veenstra, I own and operate a funeral home here in town. Moved here when I was 5, and I'm 46 years old.
I know the turnover to make it seem like we should know each other and exchanged emails for the last few days. So we'll let him take off and maybe we can try to save any questions at the end if we got a few minutes. If we got some other questions that develop after that, maybe we'll figure out a way to get an answer. So the floor is yours, Mickey.
All right. Thanks, everybody. First of all, you can hear me well enough? All right.
We're good.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for your service to your community. I know this is probably not the most exciting work in the world that you all are doing, but it is important, especially for the unique 5 communities in Iowa that have the special or home rule charter. You guys are special, to say the least. And so, again, I want to thank you for that opportunity. And actually, I have probably a bit more time than I said before, Dave. So I could probably go by 4:45 if the questions are coming in strong. But I do have a family commitment later today that I need to get to. So I'm sorry to shortchange you a little bit, but I do want to address your questions and try to provide as much guidance as I can in the time we have together. I'm going to just do a brief overview of kind of the forms of government in Iowa. Which again is probably not the most exciting thing in the world, but it is important to understand as you guys talk about your charter there and potentially some changes and just kind of how things generally work. Some of you, I think we've met before. Some of you this is our first opportunity. Here at the Iowa League of Cities, we're a nonprofit association, nonpartisan, funded by the city governments of Iowa. There are 939 incorporated cities in Iowa, and we have about 862 members. So almost all the cities in Iowa belong to us. And the whole point of the League of Cities is really a couple things: education and services, which is kind of more my area, of the league services. We do a lot of training, a lot of workshops, a lot of discussions like this with members, just trying to help them do their jobs, understand what their roles and responsibilities are, and how to run a city government successfully. And the other thing is that we represent cities at the Capitol and advocate for city governments with legislators, which we're in the midst of doing right now, of course. And so there's other things we do, of course, as the league, but those are really the two big things that we do for cities. As a membership organization, we are always trying to be responsive to city officials and city government's needs, which change every single day, which is actually one of the great parts about my job is no day is the same as the one before, and it's a lot of good questions, a lot of good conversations. Again, I'm going to start with a brief overview just on city forms of government. All of this is based in Chapter 372 of the State Code of Iowa. There are 6 forms of government for practical purposes that cities can use. 97% of those 939 cities in Iowa use what is called the mayor-council form of government. That's kind of the default form of government. And within that, you have some choices locally, but out of those 97%, almost every single one of them has an odd number of council seats, and almost every one of those has 5 council seats and 1 mayoral seat. That is by far and away the most common form of government among the 939 cities in Iowa. Within that form of government, the mayor is never allowed to vote, not to break a tie, or anything. They can't vote at all. They're not a voting member. The mayor is the presiding officer of the council, and their legislative power really is the veto power, and they can veto resolutions and ordinances. But again, they cannot vote as a voting member of the council. There are, I think, 12 cities out of those 97%. There's 12 cities that have an even number of council seats. So you see a handful of those out there. And in those particular 12 cities, the mayor can break a tie. So there's some unique things, even among the kind of the default setting or default form of government. Now that's the big group. Then we have approximately, I'm trying to remember exactly, I think there's 24 cities in Iowa that have some of the other forms of government. There are, I think, 12 that have the council manager form, where they enshrine the city manager position right into the form of government. So Cedar Rapids is the most recent one that switched into that form of government about 15 years ago now. Some others have had this, the council manager form for quite some time. And then you have another 10 or so that have special charter, home rule charter. So you guys are home rule charter. I think there's 5 of you out there. Now, many of those actually kind of took the council manager form of government, but then wanted some unique kind of twists on things. And so it looks a lot like the council manager form of government, but you wanted, again, you wanted some unique things locally. So you had to go down the special charter or home rule charter path like you all did. And so it's unique in that there's not many cities in Iowa that have chosen to have that as their form of government. But it is important because at some point in time, your citizens voted to use that form of government, and your charter says this is what we do. This is how we represent ourselves on the council. You guys, of course, adopted the city manager position via ordinance. Trying to remember what year that was, 1984. And so that's, 40 plus years now, you've had that included in your form of government. And so it's important to distinguish that, because for the cities that have the council manager form, they can't just eliminate the city manager position overnight by council prerogative. They would actually have to change their form of government if they ever wanted to reduce or eliminate the city manager position or reduce its powers and duties and so on and so forth. So that's, again, it's a very important distinction for you all compared to some of the cities that have, like Cedar Rapids, that has the council manager form written right into their form of government. And so, again, it's probably not all that relevant to today's conversation, but it's maybe important to understand as you kind of look at some different styles, different ideas from different cities, understanding, what they're kind of held to with their form of government versus what you're looking at with your special charter. before I go too much further, any questions just kind of on the higher level stuff that I just mentioned? Okay, I can see like,
I think we're good. Okay.
When you talk about manager and.
Why don't you flip your button up there, so, yeah.
Yeah. You talk about council manager, does that include administrators like we have? Is that the same
Yeah.
thing?
I should have
I
said
guess-
earlier.
All right.
Yeah, feel free to chime in with questions at any point.
I
It's not
think
an
the
interruption.
question might be is, are the city administrator, city manager interchangeable kind of terminology? These had a little different but I think was that kind of the question, Kenyon? That when you, sometimes we use the term city manager, sometimes city administrator.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. And when I got into city government, the line in the sand was much clearer between a city manager and administrator. In recent years, it's really become interchangeable terms. Back in the day, city managers tended to have more hiring and human resources powers. A lot of them were granted the ability to directly hire and fire staff, including department heads, without council approval, whereas city administrators, for the most part, did not have that level of authority when it came to employment decisions. And a lot of times they would have a role to play. They might make a recommendation to the council, a city administrator did, but ultimately the council would have to approve any employment decisions, hiring, firing, promotions, demotions, you name it. Now, again, a lot of that has changed in recent years, and a lot of cities they have kind of modified it so that the city administrator or manager has quite a bit of hiring authority or firing authority or employment authority, except for some key positions. A lot of cities, even a city manager, cities, they still have to have council approval for the chief of police position, maybe some other department heads, but this is where you start to see some differences from city to city, even among the cities that have the city manager or city administrator position. There are about 200 cities in Iowa out of the 939 that have a city administrator or city manager position. So there's still going to be some differences, even among those 200 cities, on just how much power that is granted to the city manager or to the city administrator position. But again, back in the day, it was much more of a clear distinction. Now it's kind of been morphed into just how do you want to, what title do you prefer to use? Not much difference now as much these days. And so that leads me to another, I think, big piece for you guys, as Dave was giving me some background here on the city manager's powers and duties and authorities and so on and so forth. So again, you guys went, back in the day, went down the path of creating the city manager position via ordinance and then describing those powers and duties via that ordinance, which is great. That's fine. That's very common outside of those cities that went with the council manager form of government. Under those cities, the council or the city manager's powers are actually specified right into the form of government. For all the other cities that have the city administrator or city manager position, those powers and duties and responsibilities are actually spelled out in the city code. And then, of course, you have job descriptions and stuff like that, which is also important. And so the upside, I guess you could say, for the cities like yours is that you don't have to change your form of government to change the city manager or administrator's powers and duties. You can actually just adopt that via code change. And so if you say, hey, we want to give the city manager or city administrator more authority to do hiring decisions, we don't want to have the council have to do approvals for every time we need a seasonal lifeguard or whatever, or to terminate someone, frankly. We'd rather have the city manager handle most of those, except for chief of police, fire chief, fire or finance director, any of the department heads. You can do that, and you can make those changes as the council sees fit. Now, again, you guys have the unique situation of being a special charter city, so you always have to check your charter to make sure that that is consistent with what the charter language provides, which again, I think yours does allow for that. since the manager position is not specifically included in the charter itself. It just kind of refers to it, but then the position was created by ordinance back in '84. And so it's still left with the council having the ability to make changes to the duties, responsibilities, authorities, and so forth via code change. Does that make sense? Okay. The other thing too that you always have to be cognizant in your type of city, your form of government is, and this is unique, this is very unique. I think only you and Iowa City, and I believe, I know I'm forgetting somebody, but there's very few cities that have a referendum process, a citizen initiative process. Almost no cities in Iowa have this. It's very much more common to see in other states, especially the further you go west in our country, the more you see city forms of government to allow for direct citizen initiatives to be led by citizens to file a petition asking for an initiative, a referendum on some kind of public policy issue. And so you guys have that now with limitations. And that's important because sometimes citizens tend to think that I can petition my council to do a new dog park or something or other, any kind of local thing that people want. But you guys have spelled out some pretty, specific limitations on that power for residents on what they can and cannot petition for when it comes to putting a referendum question on the ballot. And so that's important. Again, that's unique to cities. A lot of cities in Iowa, they don't have that. And for most of our cities, if citizens want something done, they just have to go old school and go to the council members and just, good old school retail politics and say, I really think we should have that dog park, and just keep on using their political powers as citizens to try to convince a majority of the council to get that dog park approved. And so there's no initiative process in most of our cities. They just have to work the council to get that initiative done. So that is really, I think, critical for your community and your form of government, which I'm sure there's some good and some bad to allowing citizens to do that. You never know when they're going to file a petition on something that, some others in town may say, like, that's not important. Why are we having to vote on this? But at the same time, it's in your charter. You got to allow for it. So any questions on that? Because I think that is, again, pretty unique for cities in Iowa to have.
Mickey, this is Rich Phelan. I do have one question on the referendum. Does state code dictate the number of signatures in any way for that to happen?
No, since you guys are a special charter, this is entirely up to you in terms of thresholds that you would require in order to get enough signatures to force a referendum, force a ballot question. And I know I read through this. I'm trying to remember. Do you guys, Dave or anyone else, do you know off the top of your head if there is a?
Doesn't it go
No,
back
it
to
does
the
say.
percent of the eligible electors of the
It-
previous
That's
election?
right.
Yeah,
25% of the number of persons who voted in the last regular city election, but not fewer than 1,500 qualified electors. So that's a pretty high threshold, in my opinion. That's on. It looks like it's number 12 within section 2.0 or 2. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm losing you guys. 2.07 of your code. So that's, just my opinion. Not that my opinion means much since I don't live there and I don't serve on your council. But that's probably good to have a high threshold. Otherwise, you could have referendums constantly from, if that number was much lower, like say 100, you could get petitions every month. Which is not to say that's necessarily a bad idea because you want to always be responsive to your public, but anytime you have a special election, the city has to pay for that. And that's always my concern when I see stuff like that happening. It's like, we've got to have some bar to make sure it's not just anytime a small group of citizens has an idea that we're just automatically having a referendum. Again, just my opinion. That's how I see
Yeah,
it.
Mickey, oh, sorry. No,
Yeah.
Go.
No, go ahead.
Mick- Hi, Mickey, this is Matt Brish. Just wondering, so in our home rule charter, it speaks to qualified electors of at least the 25% of the number of persons who voted in the last regular election, but not fewer than 1,500. But then the state code in 362.4 talks about a petition of eligible electors. Can you talk about like what the difference or if there's any impact or
I don't think,
significance?
yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be to probably reference eligible electors in your city code. It's a minor change, but I think it should match the state code because I'm guessing that's the intent of your city code is to say eligible electors like the state code does, which is the eligible elector is simply that you are eligible to vote. It doesn't mean necessarily that you are registered to vote. It just means that you are eligible to vote. And so that's all the state code says, which basically means you are of 18, at least 18 years old, and you have your voting rights as a resident of the city. So for city elections, you obviously have to be a city resident in order to vote. So that's
thank you.
basically it. Yeah. That's a good
Mickey, quick,
question. Yeah. Go ahead.
quick question. From your experience, what do you think about the threshold of 25%? I mean, I think I like 1,500, but I don't know, is 25% too high, not high enough? What do you typically see?
Yeah, so this is where it gets tricky because city elections tend to get lower turnout than regular elections or national elections for that matter. And so you have to look at your voting performance in past regular city elections to see like what does that number actually reflect versus the 1,500 threshold. So if you have a very active voting community, because I think what's Clinton's current population, like 20 something thousand?
24,000.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, I'm not a mathematician, but 25,000 or, 24,000, 25% of that is going to be a higher threshold than 1,500. But if you look at your last city election, again, most cities do not see high turnout with their city elections. So,
What did the Parks petition have to have?
Yeah, I think 1,500 was the
You
trigger.
did the minimum?
Yeah, and if we had counted the 25% that voted in the last election, I can't remember exactly, but I thought it was maybe 900 or.
okay.
There was just recently a petition to do just exactly this to get an ordinance implemented, and Matt Brish was involved with some of that. So you said 900, give or take.
I think that was the
if it was the 25. So either the minimum of 1,500 came into play.
Okay. Yeah. So it's you're going to get different opinions on what is a fair number, minimum number to get to a threshold. And it's, again, as I said before, I think it should be high enough where you have a manageable amount of possible referendums any given year while still giving people the chance to petition their city government for change. All that being said, it's still very unique to just the 2 or 3 cities that allow for citizen initiatives in this type of sense. Because the other cities out there don't have this. You just have to go to your council meetings and ask for change in most of our cities. So that's why it's still unique to you all in terms of having this particular process even be part of your charter. You don't have to. You can eliminate that. There's no requirements that you even have a citizen initiative process. But I'm guessing it's probably near and dear to your, the history of Clinton, and getting rid of it entirely may not be palatable. So if that's not not on the board or on the table, then it's probably a question, okay, how do we manage this so it's still available, but that we're not just opening the door wide open? Because I always look at also like you have elections on purpose. The citizens elect people to represent them, and those council members should hopefully be responsive to their residents, their constituents. And so if they do hear, hey, we really got to think about this dog park, because every coffee I go to, every time I'm at the grocery store, I hear 2 or 3 people saying they really want that dog park. Okay, that should be enough to put that item on the agenda for the rest of the council to start talking about, without having to rely on a ballot question. Again, that's just maybe I'm too optimistic there, but that's how I would look at it. Like, council members have a job to do. They talk to their residents, they talk to their business owners. in town and say, okay, I'm hearing a lot about this, hearing a lot about that. We need to have an agenda item at the next meeting to talk about it. So, the other thing I know we wanted to talk about, not just, and if there's more questions, keep them coming. There was one question I know Dave wanted us to talk about regarding just the council size, 7, I think remind me, 7 is the number, correct, guys?
Seven council members and an elected mayor.
Right.
That basically is a non-voting mayor. I'm not sure what the terminology would be, but Scott would tell us. But the mayor, doesn't have a vote on the council. It's a seven voting council members, four wards and 3 at large right now.
Right. And that is higher than most cities. As I said before, almost every city out there has 5, 7. You see that here and there. There's, I think Davenport has 10. And Des Moines has 9. Those are the 2 anomalies out there. Then you got a few itty bitty towns that are at 3. That's the minimum. There's no maximum in state code. So you guys, as special charters, in theory, you could have 27 members of your city council. That would be crazy, but you could. There are more discussions these days about reducing council sizes because I think some communities are having a hard time recruiting or getting people interested in serving on the city council. I've also seen a number of cities switch away from ward systems like you have and going to all at large, which again is probably reflective of having a hard time getting people from different neighborhoods or wards to run. And so you're trying to figure out ways that we still have a full council and full membership. It's not all that hard to change, to be honest, under state code to reduce your council size. It can be led by city council initiative. Now, again, you're a special charter city. I don't think you did, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a process spelled out in the charter to reduce the council?
I don't believe there's a process. If the group wanted to lower it to 5, I don't think there's a process, but I thought there was a state process outlined somewhere, but I couldn't find it. If you wanted to change and how that election would work, and I don't know if we wanted to change the number, then if we would have to define that process.
I think you would as a special charter city, because the cities, that mayor council form of government that I mentioned before, that's going to be in section 372.4 of the state code. And that's where I was saying before, where that for those cities, the city council can actually lead the process and by ordinance reduce the council seats from 5 to 3, for example. But since you guys are a special charter city, I believe you would have to change your charter to reflect that, which would take voter approval. So it's going to be a bit higher bar for you all if you're serious about reducing the council seats from 7 to 5, for example. I would guess it wouldn't be as challenging to get voter approval, but you never know. So that's why you're all meeting, I'm sure. These are the types of questions you should be talking about. But I think you would have to take a look at that composition section in 2.03 right at the top. It talks about 7 members. Then it talks about 3 as at-large, 4 as ward. So there's really 2 questions, I think, for the group as you continue to meet in whether, okay, do we want 7? Well, maybe not. If we go to 5, what does that look like? How do people feel about that? And then the second part would be, do we want to get rid of the wards? Is there a value to keeping the wards? That's a great question. There's probably some good and bad to the cities that have the ward system versus the ones who don't. The wards back in the day, as I'm sure you can imagine, the main idea being this is a way to help ensure that the different neighborhoods of the community are represented. The challenge, though, that comes with it is that sometimes we don't get a lot of people from this neighborhood or that neighborhood interested in running, and we're kind of left with what we got. Go ahead, question?
Yeah, this is Rich again. Mickey, I noticed that Iowa City has an interesting approach to that, is that they have wards, but all the council people are voted at large, so that everybody in Iowa City votes, even though, say I'm the 4th ward council person, and everybody in Clinton would have to vote up or down. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm an Iowa City native, so I can say this without being too disparaging. They are unique. I was going to say they were weird. They're proudly weird. No, you gotta love them. It's unique within uniqueness, and they elect 7 people. They don't elect them. The citizens of Iowa City do not elect their mayor directly. The council, 7, then elect the mayor to be the mayor, but the mayor still votes. So they have wards, and they have 3 at large. I think it is 4 wards and 3 at large, or maybe it's the flip of that. Can't quite remember now. But again, the citizens of Iowa City do not elect their mayor directly. The 7 council members do. And so it's an awkward system to say the least. I've heard good and bad about that over the years. I think I don't know if it's gonna. I think they might change that, to be perfectly honest. I've heard some whispers that they're kind of going through a similar process.
Well, just
with their
you don't
charter
make
commission.
they just finished their process, and that was the biggest argument or the biggest debate among their Home Rule Charter Review Commission, and they voted to leave it as it is and elect the 7 council members, and those 7 council members elect the mayor. So they considered changing it, and their charter commission said, leave it as it is.
Oh, there you go.
And they just completed that, I think, the first of this year.
Okay, yeah, I knew they were having some chats about it. I've heard some stuff back home. And then obviously in my position here, I hear a lot of things going around in the state. And I guess I'm a little surprised they didn't change. I know there's been some frustrations from different folks that don't feel like it's the most open process to especially elect the mayor. It's always kind of a weird thing over there. But again, change is hard. Once you get accustomed to a certain system, because I think like you guys, they've had their system since the 70s, with it being a special charter. And, that's a couple of generations worth of folks have gotten used to their system. So it's hard to change these things and get people on board with a new idea, which you may run into, if you guys are looking at some substantial changes to your structure of your government and the number of council seats. I'm sure you're aware you're probably going to run into some opposition to that, but it's worth having the conversation, even if it amounts to or results being no change. It's still worth having these conversations. The other thing I think we wanted to definitely address today, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, was some best practices on the supervision of the city administrator, which is always a big part to the 200 cities that have that position. And again, there's differences from town to town on just how much power and duties and responsibilities that are entrusted in the city administrator or city manager position. And so there's no straight up answer I can give you on what works best. But I would always say that having everybody understand, first of all, the form of government, the chain of command, what the managers are expected to do is always most important. That's all. Most of the issues that I see is because there's a lack of understanding, both among the council, but also among the staff, including the city manager, him or herself. There's role confusion, management confusion. That is almost always at the heart of when there's some issues locally with the manager and decision making and so on. So I always usually start when I'm brought into conversations. I usually start with has anybody read the city code? Has anybody read this ordinance? And then the other thing too is most managers and administrators work under employment agreements, which is unique within the city staffing picture. Most of the other staff, even the other department heads, do not work underneath or through an employment agreement, but most city managers and administrators do. And so that employment contract or agreement becomes really critical because obviously both parties have to live up to that agreement, whatever they agreed to when that thing was signed. And so that's another aspect to managing the city manager. So best practices, I always start with that. Everyone needs to know, what does the city code say? What does an employment contract say? What does the job description say? But all of those things can be changed. They can be renegotiated. They can be amended. The city code can be amended. And so all these things they're not set in stone. You can make changes, and so that's important to note. For your purposes, I would imagine that, well, let's put it this way, for most communities that have that position, it's a team effort. When you sign a contract, the employment contract with the city manager, it is usually executed by the mayor, but the council has to actually approve it. Like any contract, the council actually has to approve it. And so for it to go in force, because they represent the council or represent the city government. And so the mayor has a key role as, being the presiding officer, but the council has a key role of actually approving the contract itself and approving, the city ordinance that gives the city manager powers. So it's a team effort, but obviously that also opens up the door for different opinions among the 7 council members and the mayor on how well the city manager or city administrator is doing with this, that, and the other thing. You're going to have some folks who are the biggest champions of the city administrator, others who think the city administrator needs to do better. You're going to have some others who think the city administrator needs to go. And so that's always a challenging part of city government for those 200 cities in Iowa, especially because everyone's been elected. You have every right to have your opinion as a council member or mayor, but having alignment at all times is almost impossible. So you're going to have different opinions on what the administrators should be doing or how they can improve or what they're doing really well with. And so some of the basic things I say is, first of all, do an annual review. If you don't do it already, you should be doing an annual review. The council should be involved in that. I would say the mayor should be in the lead on that because, again, the mayor is the presiding officer. They have veto powers, so you got to respect their powers in that sense. But I think the council has to be involved. The best case scenario that I've seen out there is each of the council members fills out a form of some sort to do the performance evaluation. The mayor is kind of tasked with being the ringleader, if you will. And then they all work together when it comes time to actually conduct the performance review with the administrator face to face. And so the mayor is kind of consolidating these different comments or scoring, whatever you do with your performance reviews. There's a million different ideas out there when it comes to employee performance reviews. But the mayor kind of consolidates that and sort of, okay, we got different opinions on this, we got different opinions on that, but this is kind of the consensus of the council on things you can do better, things you're doing really well with. If there's some serious issues, maybe you talk about performance improvement plans. But also, eventually, you also have to have, for a poor performing city administrator, what is our exit strategy in terms of termination? And then you go back to the contract and say, what is the termination clause? Because you got to follow that too. So there's a lot of, some of you probably are very familiar with employment laws and practices. It can get very complicated. I'm sure the city of Clinton has a lot of employment policies that also dictate how you deal with discipline and termination and so forth. Obviously, nobody wants that to ever happen, but it's something you got to be aware of as well. So hopefully that kind of gives you a big picture sense of what good management looks like from the elected officials dealing with the city administrator. But I've been around enough to know that it doesn't always work out that way, and trying to balance different opinions on the council, it can be pretty difficult.
Any other quick questions before we let Mickey head out to his next event?
Yeah, this is Rich again. Dave, I presume you've got contact info for Mickey and we
Yeah.
can pass questions.
If we develop something further, will you help give us your insightful knowledge?
Yes, and I'm happy to join you guys again for another meeting. I feel bad for having a short window today, but normally I have much more availability. So if I haven't burned any bridges today by being too talkative, as you can tell, I'm pretty long-winded. Usually it's my own fault when I'm late for something. But that being said, I am very happy to take questions or come back for another meeting or both. I work for you guys, and so never hesitate to use myself or anyone here at the league for anything that comes up. We're always here to help. So as you continue to have your meetings and you have more questions that come up, the offer is always on the table.
So we appreciate that and.
Mickey, I've got something real quick for you. This
Yeah.
is Sean Connell. So I've got a copy of your League of Cities council and kind of mayor packet that's been distributed over the years. I think this is a 24 version. So I just want to reiterate, so we are, mayor council form of government, but it's kind of with a caveat, right? Just because we have the home rule charter, because in the Iowa League of Cities, it's listed as a separate form of government, but we're really not. I mean, it's mayor council with the caveat of having a home rule charter. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that statement? Okay.
I do.
Just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, and looking at what you guys have, it's largely taking that kind of traditional form of government, the mayor council form of government, and adding in that citizen initiative thing. That's probably the most unique thing that you guys have with your home rule charter. Because again, the other cities that you see that have the more unique stuff, they've either done the council manager form, which is a specific form of government, enshrining the city manager position into the form of government. And that's probably the only real main difference out there that I would point to for the other cities that have that are not using the mayor council form of government. So yeah, what I would guess way back whenever this was approved, that you guys, your predecessors way back when took that mayor council form of government and then sort of modified it for Clinton's purposes, with the big distinction being that citizen initiative and referendum process.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mickey. Well, it's 4:45, so we'll let you head out to your next event.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for your time, and if we got some questions, we'll let you know.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All good. Next order, adopt minutes. We need to make one quick change because the minutes indicated that you were present and you were not. Is that correct? Just so I didn't get what you were absent from last meeting.
I was.
Okay. So, and we'll kind of jump the process here. We'll just amend that, make note of that, and ask for motion to, approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second.
And as what's a roll call vote or a voice vote on that? We can just do a voice vote on the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Next item is communications. I have a couple notes. You should have gotten a communication I included with all the agenda information from Pat O'Connell, that basically our preamble and stuff was okay, which I didn't, so I don't think, we didn't change anything, so then you've all gotten, back up. Here's my hope is if we get communications, they end up with me somewhere along the way. And if they're in time, then my hope is to send out the agenda, the minutes, and any communications that we may have had, whether it's input or whatever else, with all that. So hopefully you'll get all that in time. You just got one today from, I guess Sean forwarded it to us from Cody Seeley. What our plan is, we'll just accept the communications. They will go into a folder of our information, all of our minutes and agendas that we'll keep together. The council will not have to do anything with the communications to us. So if you want to review those comments, not, I'd ask for a motion to, I guess, simply to accept those comments or communications we have.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, we have to have a formal motion to accept, don't you, to accept the communications, or can we just say we've got them?
Just place on file with.
Just place on file. Well, they'll go into a home rule charter.
At the committee
The-
level, I don't think.
Okay, then we'll just, as long as you all have the communications, I'll just make sure you all got what we
Yeah,
can.
Shouldn't
I don't want to hold this process up
No.
by getting too formal here. We're a subcommittee and we
But I
want
just
to
wanna
be,
make- yeah.
we want to be careful about making sure we meet the open meeting laws and all that, but beyond that, let's just have some open discussion and.
Yeah. Well, I said, but that's the communication. Well, the communications will get, we've got those inputs. When we get to those sections, that's input. That's my philosophy anyway.
Is there a formal acknowledgement, though, of that, just so that, from you, Dave? I mean, I would hope that if there was someone that, there should be some type of formal acknowledgement
That we
that we
received it?
received it, you know?
That's what I would, that's all I would reference. So basically, if somebody sends something to us, and we're gonna make sure everybody gets it, we're gonna acknowledge that we received an email from, say, Councilmember Seeley or whoever that may be, or, you know, Joe Blow in the public, and then that we'll just place them on file with the clerk.
I just would make sure that someone
Yeah.
that maybe didn't, because they're not going to send it to all of us, that they get acknowledgement that it's been,
I can do that. And don't worry about the open meetings law, we won't mess that up. But communications, and I don't know that we need to talk about each communication as they come in. We've gotten input when we get to, the sections that input relates to. That's where you can rely on that. If that's what you're thinking, Rich, I don't know that we need to talk about Cody's input piece by piece, because.
Sorry,
No, I just want to make sure that I was on the right page.
I mean, at some point, we might refer back to it when
Yes.
we're talking about that particular section. but-
That's what I vision.
But I don't know,
But we need to have some acknowledgement that we did receive it. I think part of this is in a sense, almost a legal process. So we just want to make sure that any communications we have are
today, yeah.
are put on,
Just,
and-
well,
Reflected in the minutes.
yeah, reflected in the
3 o'clock.
minutes, that should be good
Okay,
enough. And,
so
You're gonna
it's
accept
in your mail.
yeah, and there will be, we haven't got it all worked out, there will be some type of a folder of information for the Home Rule Charter Review Commission. The city will keep in all the communications, all the minutes, all that stuff will be in that folder, so that 10 years from now, somebody can go back and look at it, if they want.
but aren't we, like, we kind of quasi-approved, we approved the preamble, but we're
Yes.
going to do a final approval,
And-
because someone could come up in June and say, change the preamble to this, so
Yes.
it's not official until
Until
it's
we-
all over,
until
correct?
Until we have a final vote at the end. So we just have accepted all the communications. And I will, if that's fair, if we get something, if some of you get something, an email, make sure that, you know, we all get it or whatever, and I can, once we get that all, I can grab an email address or an address and write it and say.
If we get
"Hey,
something, we
you're-"
just shoot it to you. right?
Yeah, and then my goal will be to get it out to you if you haven't already gotten it. That'll be
Well-
my goal, so you'll all have it before.
The only
before
thing
the
you
meeting.
have to be careful of is, as Sean said in his email forwarding this, is that don't reply all.
Don't reply all.
So many of us are just, reply all on everything.
Do not do that.
That's where you get into.
idea. I really think we should do this.
Yeah. Yeah, if you get an email, don't reply all. That's the first, one of the first things they teach you in your council training on the open meetings law, don't reply all. So next, we have we set things up to start talking about the council section, if we wanted to move ahead with that for a few
I was
minutes.
just gonna make just a quick note on something that he did
Yeah.
say, and we were talking about, the 25%. So there was, I don't know,
1,449.
I went back to your election, in
The last city
2019.
election had 1,449 ballots cast, so 25% of that was
Right.
363.
And so I was gonna reference the 2019 one, which was one of our largest turnouts we've had
Oh, that-
in many years, and it was just over 4,000 people that voted. So, 25% mark, I think we're looking now at 1,000. That's something eventually we can discuss, but I just thought that was interesting, because we usually see low turnout.
Yeah.
That I had no idea what the turnout was, but I like the idea of 1,500. That it keeps it from getting to be ridiculous where
Yeah.
if anybody,
Yeah.
everybody and their brother can put one in.
That's an interesting note when we get to that section of what that number is.
Yeah, and kind of just historically interesting, that process has only been completed twice, right, in the last 41 years?
Is it twice or?
And the first time was that in the 1990s? So more than 30 years, you know, the two, so if there's a quarter of a century between each one, it's not, you know, excessive. And that 1,500 number, that was set back when the population of Clinton was, what, 36 or
Yeah.
35,000?
Yeah, so-
You know, so it, yeah, that balance, I think, is, yeah, important to try to guess. But, yeah, at least historically, it's been, I don't think overused if it's
Yeah.
every quarter of
Yeah.
a century.
We'll get to that. But we have the council first. How far do you want to go? It says, we can start at the top. And obviously, I don't think we'll get through the section today. But it gives us something to think about. Do you want to start at the top?
Well, let me stir the pot right away.
All right. You're hired.
Listening to Mickey's commentary, I kind of got an overwhelming sense of pride that I think that our current setup with wards and 3 at large disenfranchises no one and gives everybody the opportunity to have skin in the game. And I think sometimes it's good to be unique if positive things happen from being unique. And in looking back in my experience as an elector in this city, I think our uniqueness is working very well. To go to all at large, I think, is a great way to disenfranchise large swaths of our citizenry, and I don't think that's the direction that we want to go. So that's my 2 cents.
I'll jump in. I would agree with you. I think it's a good idea to have wards. I do like the suggestion that Cody made around, I think we ought to look at maybe we have one for each ward and 1 at large. I think we should be looking at 5, to be honest with you.
I agree
I
with
think we need to get more efficient.
I agree with you, Joe. Any organization is successful based on the people it attracts. And without throwing stones at anybody, but I've been in this city for over 45 years, and we've had strong councils, and we've had very weak councils. And we have to be able to attract good people. And I think 7 is I'm just saying my opinion here, I think 7's too high of a number.
So I would say is the times that we've had a weak council, is that a process issue or is that a person issue?
It's a person issue, John, but I think the organization, and Joe is still working in Lyondell, knows how much we spend time on getting the organization structure right. But you still have to attract the right people. And I think the more people positions you're trying to fill, the harder it becomes.
So I would ask, in your opinion, when we have had weak councils, was it because we couldn't attract more viable at-large candidates, or was it a ward issue?
I'm not saying eliminate wards. I agree with Joe. We should still have 4 wards or whatever, 3 if that's the number. But I believe that the council number should be less than 7. So you'd have, and my suggestion would be to go 4-1, have 4 wards and 1 at large. I don't know is that what Cody said? I can't remember. I read it, but.
I just said 5 at large.
My
said 5 at
sense,
large, yeah.
I've been sat in the position. I will tell you, when fielding as a council member, the citizens don't really, a lot of them don't know what ward they're in. They call with a question, they email with a question, can you help me out? And it's like, I went to the city's website, and I emailed so-and-so, so then, of course, at-large gets it. If there were more at-large, I feel like you'd have a little bit more, I don't know, gusto when going to the city, because sometimes, approaching the cities can be difficult for a citizen. And I think that's the other side of the coin, right? We're trying to look at efficiency, and I think that's great, scaling that back, but the citizens just want to be heard and taken care of. And that's really, it's customer service, right? And if we can do that and make it efficient, I think it's a win. But I like how the ward setup is nice, but representation on the at-large level is also a benefit. Because I remember when I was first into it, well, that's not, I was at large, but, so-and-so emailed with a problem, they're their first ward. Well, you're telling me if you email a first ward council person, they can't call down and on your behalf? Like, to me, that's a little, here's red tape, let's throw it up in front of them, because they had a sewer backup and they're, we don't wanna deal with it. Tell them to go to the website, fill out a form. To me, that's just not good customer service, and I feel like we have to represent, regardless of the ward, we have to represent the whole city up here. And I think that's, sometimes that's what gets lost, right? People get frustrated, and then, of course, then they armchair Facebook, and, the city sucks.
And John, I'm going to stir your pot a little bit. It seems like over the years, sometimes what I've seen is that who can run for council is kind of arbitrarily picked sometimes by what side of the street they live on. If they live on the north side and they're in another ward, and there's already 2 or 3 people running for that seat and nobody running in the other ward, it just seems. And then also, over the years, someone may run for a ward seat, and halfway through their term, they have to move into another ward, and then, the upheaval of all of that. It just, from my opinion, it just seems like we're not a city that one ward fights against another ward for a certain project, and, there's not fighting, but, arguing over which ward gets what. It's, I haven't seen that over the years. It just kind of seems to me like an arbitrary way to split up the city that really limits the people that can run or want to run for a council seat.
I'll throw my nickel in here. And I thought it says, if you do all at large, in my opinion, it says you set up and I'd say the high probability that if you look at this over a 10 or 20 or 40-year basis, there are going to be times when you would have a majority, maybe a supermajority of the council, who could all live within 2 or 3 blocks of each other. The rest of the city may feel like I have no representation on the council. You could end up with 4 or 5 of the council members all living north of 19th Avenue North, because that's where right now, who knows, and the rest of the city feels like they have no representation. They have nobody who defends their area. I think that disenfranchised, we want to use that term. I think people could feel like they have no say-so. They have nobody on the council who will listen to them, although they're a council member. But, and that leads to that's okay. You could have everybody at 19th live on the north end or live on the west end or wherever, and you could have a whole neighborhood. And they're going to drive through whatever's good for their neighborhood, but not the rest of the community. Could I get 3 neighbors or 4 neighbors from our neighborhood and get rid of the neighbor because their house is a mess? You could do that if they're all that large. It's a little harder when you have wards to have that type of representation. That's my fear of all at large. I like the idea of this, it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well,
And is it the charter setup the answer to citizen involvement?
the thing about if it ain't broke, don't fix it is not why we're here.
No,
We're looking at best practices. And I'm telling you, one of the best practices should be that we attract the best people. Now, how we best do that is up for debate.
well, you have 3 at-large seats right now that anybody in the city can run for. There are 3 seats, I think there's 2 on the ballot this November. Anybody in the city, it's open.
But
And-
what's interesting, and I don't have the facts to prove it, but just thinking about this, it appears that, and I'll go back into the auditor's website for the election returns, but it feels like there's never really a contested election for the wards. It seems like it's almost when someone retires or quits, that there's more people for the appointment than to run. I'll before the next meeting, I'll tabulate that, but Dave, you probably know this from the news director. I mean, I think there was the last at-large
There were,
was Eartha Davis and Nancy
Witt.
Witt, right? And Les Shields did a last-minute write-in campaign. And that was, what, 21, 22?
Starting since 2015, since I got on.
Yeah.
I got on in 2016. Grant Wilkie resigned in 2015 in December. So 2016, I was appointed. There were several other people up here with me. Every election since, we've had somebody quit, somebody, health reasons, whatever it was, we've had to appoint every single time. And Pat Detterman just got reelected on a special to fill the vacancy with, I'm trying to think who was in there that ran against him, but that was also to fill, he was appointed and then had to fill a vacancy on this next special election. So we've had one every single.
So Pat
interim
Detterman ran against somebody then?
Catherine Wayne County.
Yep.
Okay, okay. Like I said, I'll go back and figure that out, but it always feels like there's more.
There-
We
There's
had,
a lot of appointments.
Witt was, she had passed away or got sick, she resigned, we had an appointment there, everyone since 2016.
I just think from a,
Us to be guard against it, it ain't broke, okay?
Well, let me put it another way. I think our current setup keeps the guardrails in place because, as we all know, sometimes democracy is messy, which is a nice way of saying sometimes the best people don't always get elected, or sometimes the not best, you know what I meant to say. So I look at it as prudent guardrails to ensure that the business of the city can keep being done without or reducing the potential of citizens feeling that they don't have a voice, they don't have the access. So, yeah, I think it's more than it's not just that it's not broken. I think this has proven to be an efficient and effective way to have the council set up.
Why do you think we went down from 9 council members to 7, though? What was the reason for that?
Because there were 7 wards,
And our population was larger, right?
7 wards and 2 at large.
What happens, over the past 40 years, we've had an incredible change in our city with population, demographics, and developments, right? So what happens if all of a sudden we have a bunch of people moving in downtown? That's a different ward. And then all of a sudden we have the western suburbs pop up. And then, oh my goodness, they're all north. I mean, what happens if the Lafayette gets into, if we take a look at the changes, it's probably going to level out here at where we're at, if we're just looking at future trends and such. But we could have, if we're thinking about all these visionary things that we talk about and hear about, we could have something really interesting if all of a sudden we get a bunch of new people and they're all living in that first ward, and like, wow. I think there is still some ward demographics and pride. I agree, there are some people that don't know what ward they're living in. But I do like the fact that we're not disenfranchising people. That I think if you get rid of the wards, that some people will take it the wrong way. If we don't, if we vote the other way, what happens if the language is unclear about what happens? People will take that as a slap in the face. And that's just a reflection.
But then Iowa City too, they get, so say I live in Ward 2, I still can vote for the Ward 1 person, I think is pretty interesting,
That is interesting.
Mickey had it right, they're weird.
No, but at least you can have, a say, I don't know.
Right,
It's
that was
kinda-
kind of funky.
I don't-
Since I did the research, I'll throw this out here. Comanche, we know Comanche, they have 5 at-large council plus a mayor. DeWitt, about the same size as Comanche, they have 5 council members, 3 are at-large and 2 are from the wards. Macokota, nearby, about the same size. They have 7 council members, 5 wards and 2 at-large. By the way, I think they serve 2-year terms. I think the others are 4. Muscatine, similar sized community. They have 7, 5 wards and 2 at-large. Burlington, similar size. They have 5 at-large, and the mayor's picked from the council. Ottumwa, similar size. They have 5 council members plus the mayor. All are at-large. Mason City, I think, is one of those odd ones. They have 6 council members and the mayor. Cedar Rapids, they have 9. They have 9. Though that's, as I found, is 8 council members plus the mayor. The mayor does vote. They have 5 wards, and plus the mayor and 3 at-large council members.
It'd be interesting to see where their council members reside in Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
Because that city is, I mean, still divided along those old,
Yeah.
the south and like, take a look at DeWitt. If we're gonna take, I can almost guarantee where most of those people in DeWitt are probably living,
Yeah.
So I just like the ward.
There's all over
ward
the
idea.
board, whether it's wards at large, makeups. Some are smaller, but, I just looked them up just for fun, just to see what other communities were doing, knowing this was going to be one of the issues.
Dave, just for a sake of conversation, just kind of a straw poll amongst our group, because if we're far away between 5 and 7, then we got more work and debate to do. But, for me, I like the 5, and this isn't a motion, but just more conversation. Are people comfortable with the 5, or do they want to go with 7, just to end the evening, just on, are we, do we?
Good suggestion.
Just because we can go around,
We can-
because if we're far away from 5 and 7, then
Figure out what
we're
we
gonna
gotta
have to
do, yeah.
dedicate another meeting to that. But I think if we're at 5, then we can, or whatever. So that, my opinion is, I like the
Brian, are
5.
you asking just whether it's 5 or 7, or are we talking about wards and at large also?
I think,
One thing at a
just-
time.
yeah, I
One
just
thing
think
at a
if
time.
5 to 7.
I personally, I can't separate that, because if, and again, it says, I think, I would prefer 7.
Okay.
If the majority, here is 5, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that if it's, for example, 3 wards and 2 at large. If you do 5, I believe the ward makeup is still important in that. And just offhand, I would say 3 wards and 2 at large if you want to go to 5.
Yeah, and Dave, what's interesting about that is when the number 4 was selected for the wards, the population, about 36,000, so that's 9,000 per ward. Right now, with population at 24,000, it's about 6,000 per ward. If you switch it to 3 wards, that'd be 8,000.
Right.
So almost back to that, same kind of.
That's right.
Side.
To answer
you wanna-
Brian's question, I'm for 5, just as a straw poll here.
But that's my stance. If I'm going to support 5, I would support 3 wards and 2 at large. Otherwise, I would support 7.
Yeah, and the people I talked to support a 5, support a 5.
I support a 5. I do like having wards. The number, I really can't speak to, Dave, but,
Yeah.
but,
I think the 4 wards and 1 at large is kind of an odd, I think we'd be better off. That's my opinion.
Why do
frankly
you
speaking,
feel
I
that?
think fewer people you're more nimble and can make better decisions. I really believe that.
I'm okay, yeah, I'm okay with 5. I've lived through the 7, and I know what a pain it can be. But I also do like, it was nice to be able to, have conversations with a few council members. When you're really working through some difficult things, I will say that is nice. But I'm absolutely okay with going to 5. I do like the ward structure. Again, I'm not opposed to trying to change wards. We do need to look at that. That'll be something, I shouldn't say we, but there will have to be a commission that has to
Does
look
the
at
state,
that.
does the state decide that up, kind of like by precinct for like voting or
We have to-
population?
We have to cut that up. We did that in 2018,
Yeah.
19?
It's based.
Right after you
they all
got
have
here.
a similar amount of population. They don't-
By the
Yeah.
census, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a program that kind of does
Yeah.
that for you.
it's after the census.
You kind
But
of
it-
feed everything into it and it
So,
spits out.
But we would have, if this were to go through, the city would have to do it again, so then we could say, the recommendation would be 3 wards, or,
Well, as I read it, as chairman, I guess, and listening to the presentation, if we move to 5, then it's up to us to do have the wards drawn up. It's up to us to then determine how that move to 5 is made.
Is it up to us to decide the wards, or is it?
Well, the council will have to do it, I
Yeah.
think.
Doesn't the auditor's office do that?
Well, I think, somehow it's done. It's not a unique circumstance, it's done.
Yeah, but we're not the ones that draw that up,
No,
right?
but,
That would be the auditor because they who got to vote. They put out the voting machine, so that's who would have to do it, I would think, depending, because then you'd have to change where you vote.
well, yeah, but they're drawing the boundaries, and they do that all the time. That's not a unique.
The last time we
circumstance.
did it, the clerk worked with the auditor
Yeah,
to draw the
there's-
boundaries, and
yeah.
it was after the census. I don't remember how long after, but it was
Yeah,
after that.
it's not a unique situation to redraw that.
Yeah, just a thought. 5 will not guarantee that the best people will be running. And 5 is 2 less than 7, and that now makes it a pretty convenient group of people to get together in a garage and throw back some bush light and dictate. That's just
I had that.
just an idea. 7, like you said, you could have some people that, hey, I'm not, remember, we've had that in the past, hey, I'm not one of those guys, you know, I'm that guy that could be the rose or the thorn, you know, and, but sometimes you need a little pot stir, but that's just,
I
that's
agree.
just a reflection.
What are the difficulties with 7? I mean, I see more representation for the folks in their neighborhoods, but what?
Yeah, you know, I think
To
we've
come
had,
to a
you could probably
consensus,
speak to
you
some issues in the past where, like I said, if you have a weak council and there are things that administratively maybe aren't getting done, getting people on board. You know, and not that the council's running everything, but if there is definitely a weak council, there's things that it's like they have no control.
Just one example, what have you seen in the past that prohibited that?
I would say we had now I was before my time, but a superintendent, was it a waste superintendent that we had to get rid of, and then a finance director. There was, you know, not some strong council oversight at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe the proof of that is how many elections are uncontested. So I think, you know, the number that Ryan can get on that. I've just, you know, over the years, I would hear people run just because nobody else is. And so they throw their name into the hat just because nobody else is. And, you know, to look at, okay, what electors should always have multiple choices. And if multiple people are running for fewer seats, they have better choices, I guess. But yeah, that'd be interesting, Ryan, to see how many of those were actually uncontested. And
The good thing about at-large, that means somebody, no matter what neighborhood you live in, could run, that you could get the best person. He might not live over here, but he runs. And over here, yeah, we like him, well, so do we. But he lives over here, so we can't vote for him.
yeah.
So, you know, you might get better candidates. And the 5-2, I think balances us out.
Yeah, and the ones that actually want to run and want to do the job, if they move out of the ward, they can't be a council member anymore, right? I think that's happened a
Yeah.
few times.
Okay, if Vini gets the information, it'd be interesting to see what the auditors pick up from these other places that are open. Did they have the same situation? And maybe they're having more contested races. It would just be interesting to see similar cities, Ottumwa, Burlington, Fort Dodge, you know, all these
Marshalltown.
little other Clintons, that, do they have the same issue of getting people to run, whether it's wards or whether it's
And
at
not
large?
to drag it, I will comment, I appreciate the getting together with the bush lights. It only takes 3. When you got 5, it only takes 3 to do that because you got 3 votes. But talking to the gentleman in Iowa City, we think that's a highly political active community. He says they have trouble getting people to run. And as a comparison, we think that's a city that has a lot of people interested in government. So they've had a continuing decline of having trouble finding people to run for theirs. So doesn't answer that question. That's a bigger city, same problem. They don't have contested races. They don't have people running for city council. So that's one. My personal thoughts is if there's 5, you can throw this in the hopper, then the caveat would be there's going to be, I would lobby for some other issues, and I'll throw a couple out there. One, it's easy, 2/3 overrides a veto. That's 4. The way the code's written, a majority can get rid of a city administrator. That's only 3 votes. That's a pretty low bar. If you want to get, that's a pretty low bar to get 3 votes. You can get 3 votes for anything.
Good point, yeah.
For-
Right
for-
now,
for-
it's only 4.
Yeah, but 3's easy. There's 3 people up here. Mike can say 3 people that could give it a city administrator, have it at every meeting. They're mad at something. It's that 4th vote that counts. So
Yeah, but you
it's
also
that-
can't have, you don't have, the city doesn't want to have a reputation of canning their city
And
administrator
so-
every other day, because then you're not going to have anybody, though,
But
Dave,
you could
so.
write into the charter that it takes a supermajority of 5.
But then if
to
you
get-
have, but on the flip side of it, if you have, and I'm not saying that our council's not engaged, but if you have 5 bosses that are on the same page with the city administrator, maybe there'd be a more
Yeah.
closer connection,
Yeah,
communication.
but I'd like to think about,
direction.
I'd like to think that I would propose at some point, when it gets to that point, that there be a caveat that it takes a supermajority to, if the council, maybe they want to take the solution that the mayor can hire and fire the city administrator.
Well, Dave,
But
I guess-
I would prefer, you think about all these scenarios, 3 people to vote for something, they can get together in the garage, they can drive around town smoking cigars and drinking some beer and have the meeting before they get to the meeting. And
I hear you, and I guess these 3 sections, 3, 4, and 5, right?
yeah.
That, we're talking all about them already. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's probably some tweaking we want to do on all of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you're touching on it there.
Yeah, that
And-
just my thoughts of thinking ahead, if you want to,
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm laying out my thoughts for
point.
what it would take for me to consider.
I also believe as we
5.
get going on this, it's only going to take until, I'm going to pick out now July. July, someone's going to come back and go, what about this? And then we're going to have to go back to it too. So I mean, I think we're going to be talking in circles on some of
But
this.
at some point, you got to put your foot in the ground to make a decision.
Yeah.
But I don't think tonight's the put the foot in the ground and make a decision on 7 or 5, because we've already overshot our hour-long meeting, but we're having a good discussion, so.
Dave, before I forget, that research that you did on all the other cities, could you reduce that to an email or a document? And
Yeah.
send that to us and make that
Yeah,
part
if you
of the
like,
record,
I
'cause,
just picked some random communities. Part says, well, I figured Comanche and DeWitt because they're close. Macokota, the Macokota
Yeah,
mayor is a
just-
friend of mine, so I said, well, what are the towns of similar size? So I just kind of, just for fun, just kind of spend a,
Well, I would say that
15,
if
20
any
minutes.
of us are doing
Good, thanks.
research, we should share it with the
Yeah.
rest of the group.
I'll do the audit, I'll do the elections up to
Yeah,
what's on the
I'll-
auditors, and I'll put on a spreadsheet and send to everybody.
I'll put that up, and if you wanted, I mean, that's not a problem.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I think I mean, honestly, I don't think we're that far off. I mean, I think we're all kind of tossing out some ideas here, but I think it's a really healthy discussion.
Yeah, well, I
So-
appreciate that, and that's the idea, because we want, when we're done, that everybody can buy into it. But I think since we kind of overshot our time, and we don't need to, we'll come back to this section next time. I think we're proving that, we got to keep in mind some future sections, but I think we better kind of focus on one change at a time, and one section at a time, and if we get to the next section, have to go back and tweak something we did in the council section because of a change we made in the mayor section, that's easier to do than trying to do everything all at once.
Amen.
Make sure you disclose any NIL deals with Busch Light for mentioning that.
I guess, any other?
This committee brought to you by
Brought to you by-
Head for the Mountains.
yeah. If he brings
Yeah,
a
we
can,
could take a team photograph in a garage having a natty light or something, too.
Okay, let's call this meeting
that's
off
good.
over before we get too
I
too
think,
far down the road here.
when's our next meeting? What did I put on there?
7th.
7th?
7th,
7th? 4 o'clock, still good for everybody?
yes.
Yep.
See y'all then, meeting adjourned.
Which one are you going to be gone?
I'll get with you on that. 'cause
Okay.
I got a couple of tweaks here that
Okay.
I've